An ancient monument, towering and mysterious, stood in Ethiopia for centuries. But in 1937, it was stolen, vanished without a trace. This is the story of the Obelisk of Axum, a symbol of power and pride, ripped from its home by a foreign invader. What followed was a decades-long struggle to reclaim what was lost. Over 1,700 years ago, in the rugged highlands of Ethiopia, a powerful empire began to rise. The Axumite Empire, one of the most influential civilizations of its time, controlled vast trade routes, stretching from the heart of Africa to the distant shores of the Roman Empire and beyond. But what made Axum truly unique wasn't just its wealth. It was its mysterious monuments that towered above the landscape, silently watching over the empire's people. At the center of this empire was King Ezana, a ruler destined to shape history in ways no one could have predicted. His reign marked a turning point, one that transformed Axum from a powerful kingdom into the first ever Christian nation. But Ezana's conversion to Christianity in the 4th century wasn't just a religious shift, it was a statement, one that would resonate for centuries. And to mark his reign, Ezana left behind something that has puzzled historians and archaeologists alike: towering obelisks that seemed to defy time itself. These obelisks, massive, single slabs of stone, were unlike anything the world had seen before. They weren't just simple markers. They were symbols of power, belief, and a connection to the divine. The most famous of them all, the Obelisk of Axum, stood over 24 meters high, carved with intricate patterns and mysterious symbols. But what was their true purpose? Were they monuments to the kings of Axum, eternal markers of their power and influence? Or did they serve a deeper purpose, perhaps linked to the Axumites' beliefs about the afterlife, the heavens, or even a way to honor the gods? One thing is clear: these obelisks were more than just stones. They were messages sent across time, from the ancient past to the distant future. Each one stood as a testament to Axum's greatness, but also its mysteries. But little did anyone know that centuries later, one of these sacred obelisks, this symbol of an ancient empire's pride, would be torn from its homeland, stolen, and turned into a war trophy. And the story behind that theft, it's as shocking as it is unsettling. In the early 1930s, a dark shadow began to stretch over Europe, one cast by Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy. Mussolini had grand ambitions: to rebuild the Roman Empire, to expand Italy's reach far beyond its borders, and to make Italy a feared colonial power. His eyes turned south to the African nation of Ethiopia, the last uncolonized country on the continent. And in 1935, he launched a brutal invasion, one that would leave scars on Ethiopia for decades. The Italo-Ethiopian War was swift and devastating. Italy, with its advanced weaponry, unleashed a campaign of terror against the Ethiopian people. Bombs rained from the skies and chemical weapons were used mercilessly. For 2 long years, Ethiopia fought to resist, but by 1937, Mussolini had seized control of the country. It wasn't just land and people that Italy took. No, Mussolini wanted more. He wanted to crush Ethiopia's spirit, its culture, its very identity. Amidst the destruction, Italian forces set their sights on something ancient, something sacred: the Obelisk of Axum. Towering, immovable, and tied to Ethiopia's rich history, the obelisk was pulled from its foundation, loaded onto trucks, and shipped across the Mediterranean to Italy. But why? Why would Mussolini, on top of claiming Ethiopia itself, steal this monument of stone? What power did it hold? The answer lies in the mind of Mussolini. For him, this wasn't just a stone monument, it was a symbol of dominance. By taking the obelisk, he wasn't just stealing a piece of Ethiopia's history, he was sending a message to the world. Mussolini wanted to show that Italy was now the master of Africa, that the legacy of Rome had returned in full force. The obelisk, a marker of one empire, was now claimed by another. And so, the Obelisk of Axum was shipped to Rome, a stolen trophy of war. But Mussolini wasn't content to hide it away in a museum. No, he had it erected in one of Rome's most prominent squares, right in front of the Ministry of Italian Africa. For decades it stood there, a towering reminder of Italy's fascist ambitions and its cruel conquest of Ethiopia. Yet, As the obelisk cast its long shadow over Rome, it also cast a shadow over Italy's conscience. The Ethiopian people never forgot, and the world watched. But would this stolen treasure ever make its way back home? The struggle for its return was only beginning. The Obelisk of Axum may have stood proudly in Rome, but for the Ethiopian people, it was a stolen symbol of their identity. Even after Mussolini's fall and the end of fascism, the pain of losing such a sacred monument lingered. Ethiopia, now freed from occupation, immediately began its long fight to bring the obelisk home. But this struggle was anything but easy. By 1947, just 2 years after World War II, Ethiopia took its plea to the global stage. The United Nations, in a rare post-war intervention, sided with Ethiopia, declaring that Italy must return the obelisk. But while the UN could issue resolutions, the political reality was more complicated. Italy had fallen, but the new government wasn't eager to part with the obelisk. They delayed, stalled, and dragged their feet, claiming the logistics of moving such a massive monument were nearly impossible. Yet Ethiopia's determination never wavered. For decades, they pushed through diplomatic channels, engaging in talks, protests, and negotiations. The Ethiopian people, both at home and abroad, never forgot their stolen treasure. Each year that passed without the obelisk's return only intensified the call for justice. In the 1960s and 70s, as Ethiopia went through political upheaval, the obelisk remained a powerful symbol of national pride. Ethiopian leaders continued to pressure Italy, and international cultural organizations began to take notice. Italy, however, continued to make excuses, claiming transportation challenges and bureaucratic delays. But behind the scenes, it was clear, this was about more than just logistics. The obelisk was a painful reminder of a dark chapter in Italy's history, one they weren't ready to confront. By the early 2000s, modern technology and a shift in international attitudes finally offered a breakthrough. With diplomatic pressure mounting, Italy could no longer ignore the calls for restitution. In 2003, Italy officially agreed to return the obelisk, but even then, the process was painstakingly slow. The world watched as Italy made promises, but for the Ethiopian people, skepticism remained. Would they actually see the obelisk come home? And then, in 2005, nearly 70 years after it was stolen, the impossible finally happened. With a complex operation involving engineers and specialists, the Obelisk of Axum was disassembled, loaded onto transport planes, and flown back to Ethiopia. It was an emotional homecoming, witnessed by the nation and the world. When the pieces of the obelisk were reassembled in Axum, a collective sigh of relief swept across the country. The monument, once a symbol of colonial dominance, was now a symbol of resilience, justice, and national pride. The Ethiopian people had won their long battle, and with the obelisk standing once more in its rightful place, the nation's soul felt whole again. The return of the Obelisk of Axum wasn't just the restoration of a monument, it was the restoration of a nation's identity, proof that no matter how long the struggle, justice can prevail. This story of theft, struggle, and eventual redemption stands as a testament to the power of cultural heritage and the strength of a people determined to reclaim what is theirs. But the question remains, how many other treasures remain lost, waiting to be returned? If you want to hear more stories of forgotten histories, stolen artifacts, and hard-fought justice, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let's keep uncovering the past together.